I shouldn't have said it. Not like that. But the words slipped out before I could stop them. Then let's change that. That was the first time I saw her freeze. Her eyes, steady, a little tired, like they'd seen more winters than I ever had, shifted from the half-broken garden gate to me. I felt the weight of my own voice, reckless, hanging in the humid evening air. It started with the gate. My neighbor's fence was leaning so far it looked like a drunk trying to stand up straight. I was just back from a late shift, sleeves rolled up, toolbox in hand. She was standing there, frowning at the mess, muttering under her breath. She wasn't my neighbor exactly. She was his friend, the woman who sometimes came by, sometimes stayed too long. Late 40s maybe. Dark hair tied up like she couldn't be bothered, blouse untucked, the kind of person who carried herself like she wasn't expecting to be looked at. I had seen her before. Noticed her laugh once, low and guarded, the kind that sounded like it didn't come out often. I told myself it was nothing. Just curiosity. Need a hand? I asked, stepping toward the leaning gate. She looked at me then, really looked, as if weighing the question itself. You don't even know me. Her tone was sharper than I expected, not defensive exactly. More like a warning, or a line she'd drawn before with someone else. That's when I said it. Too fast, too certain. Then let's change that. Her lips pressed together, the kind of silence people use when they don't want to admit they're thinking. She glanced away, down at her shoes, as though the concrete was more interesting than a 20-something neighbor who didn't know when to stop talking. I set my toolbox down anyway. The gate creaked. The wood splintered under my grip, and she let out a small sigh, half irritation, half surrender. You'll get a splinter, she muttered. Wouldn't be the first. I smiled without meaning to, and when I glanced up, she was already watching me again. Not amused. Not angry. Just watching. The street was too quiet for comfort. A dog barked somewhere down the block, and a curtain twitched from the house opposite. For a second, I was aware of how close I was standing to her. How the air smelled faintly of jasmine and her perfume. How the silence between us wasn't empty, it was waiting. I hammered the hinge back into place, fingers brushing wood dust from my palms. She crossed her arms, not in defiance, but like she needed somewhere to put them. You always fix strangers' gates? She asked. Only the ones that look like they're about to fall. Her mouth curved then, not quite a smile, but softer. Something in her eyes flickered, tiredness giving way to curiosity. For a moment, I wanted to ask her name, to hear her say it. But something stopped me. Maybe the way she stood, shoulders squared as if bracing for an old storm. Maybe the way her gaze lingered too long before she caught herself and looked away. The gate held firm when I stepped back, but my chest didn't. She turned toward me, just slightly, her voice quieter than before. You shouldn't get involved. Things get messy. I swallowed. My hands itched to reach into that silence, to bridge it. Instead, I only nodded. Messy doesn't scare me. The porch light flickered, casting her face half in shadow, half in gold. She looked at me then, not like a stranger, not like a neighbor's friend, but like someone trying to decide if they could trust what they just heard. And that's when her hand brushed mine. Barely. Maybe by accident. Maybe not. She didn't move it away. Her hand lingered on mine longer than it should have. A fraction of a second, maybe less, but enough to make the air feel thick. I told myself it was nothing. A slip. But the part of me that noticed the way her knuckles tightened, then loosened, knew it wasn't just that. You shouldn't get involved, she'd said. That line kept circling in my head. Dangerous, not because of what it meant, but because of how she said it, like she already knew what involved looked like and what it cost. The gate was fixed, but I didn't leave. My hands were dusty, my shirt sticking to my back. She stood beside me, close enough I could see a loose strand of hair caught against her cheek. I almost reached for it. I didn't. "You don't live here, do you?" I asked finally. Her eyes flicked to me. "No. Just keeping an eye on the place." "He asked me to." "He?" "My neighbor. Older guy, rarely home. I'd seen him hand her groceries once, thank her too warmly." Something in my chest tightened. "So you're helping him out?" "Something like that." She shifted her weight, glanced toward the house. "After my divorce, I needed space," he offered. "Too much kindness, maybe." "Divorce." The word cracked open the silence. She didn't look at me when she said it, but her voice thinned, like the syllables were cutting on the way out. I nodded slowly, though my throat was dry. She wasn't supposed to be telling me this. I wasn't supposed to care. But I did. More than I should. I noticed then how she gripped her elbows, holding herself like she didn't want to take up room. How her gaze darted away too quickly whenever it risked meeting mine. Dangerous, I thought again. Not because of her age, or the lines faintly etched around her eyes. Dangerous because I wanted to step closer. "You know," I said, my voice quieter now, "most people just let the gate fall." That almost smile flickered again. "And you're not most people?" "No. I guess not." She studied me then, openly this time. My chest tightened under the weight of it. I shifted, suddenly aware of how young I must look to her. My calloused hands, my uneven haircut, the edge of boy still clinging to my jaw. "You should wash up," she murmured, softer now. "Come inside. I'll get you a towel." I hesitated. The house behind her was dark except for a single lamp spilling gold across the hallway. Stepping in felt like crossing something I couldn't cross back. Still, I followed. The air inside smelled faintly of coffee gone cold. The walls were lined with books, half-shelved, half-stacked, like she'd never finished putting things in order. She disappeared into the kitchen, came back with a towel, pressing it into my hand. "Thanks," I said, too quiet. She touched my arm as if by accident when she gave it to me. A fleeting warmth that sent my thoughts racing ahead of me. "Stay a little," she said. Not looking at me. Not quite asking, not quite telling. And I almost said something I knew I shouldn't. Her "stay a little" still echoed in my head as I sat on the edge of the couch, towel folded uselessly in my lap. She moved around the kitchen, filling the silence with small noises, running water, the soft clink of a mug against porcelain. I shouldn't have been there. Not in that house. Not with her. I glanced at the bookshelves again. Titles about travel, half-faded novels, cookbooks stacked crooked. It felt lived in, but only halfway, as if she hadn't fully decided whether this space belonged to her. When she returned, she wasn't holding coffee. Just herself. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, eyes lowered like she was measuring her words before she let them out. "I used to sit in silence after he left," she said suddenly. "Hours sometimes. Just listening to the house creak." I looked at her. She wasn't talking about my neighbor anymore. She was talking about her ex, about the absence he left. And for a second, I felt the weight of years I hadn't lived pressing between us. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat tightened. My fingers gripped the towel harder than I should. "You don't have to tell me this," I managed. Her eyes lifted. There was a sharpness in them, but also a dare. "Maybe I do. Maybe I want someone to hear it." And I did hear it. Too much. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and for a moment I almost told her what I noticed, that her laugh never quite reached her eyes, that she carried herself like she was afraid of being remembered. I almost told her that I couldn't stop watching her hands, even when they only fidgeted with nothing. But I didn't. I bit it back. That's when her phone rang. The sound was sharp in the stillness, pulling her eyes away from me. She turned, picked it up from the counter, her body tense as she answered. Yes. No, I'm fine. Her tone shifted, clipped, polite, practiced. I'll see you tomorrow. She hung up quickly, almost guiltily, and set the phone face down. Who was that? I asked before I could stop myself. She hesitated. Just him. Checking in? The word him sank heavy. My neighbor. I should have pulled back then. I should have stood, thanked her, left the house with my clean hands and the safe distance we both knew we needed. Instead, I stayed. My chest burned with something I couldn't name, and I watched her as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, only for it to fall again. You're looking at me like... She stopped herself, catching her breath. Like what? My voice came out lower than I meant. Her gaze didn't leave mine this time. For the first time since I'd walked in, she didn't try to hide. The silence stretched, tight, charged. Her hand brushed the edge of the couch as though debating whether to close the gap between us. And I wondered, are we about to cross it? The phone call should have been the end of it. A line drawn, a warning to step back. But instead, it made the room feel smaller, pulling me closer to her without either of us moving. She sat down across from me, the space between us too narrow for comfort. Her fingers twisted the hem of her blouse, knuckles pale. I watched them, trying not to. You don't know me, she said again, voice quieter this time. Not sharp. Almost weary. Then tell me, I said. My throat felt dry, but I didn't look away. Tell me something no one else knows. Her lips parted, but nothing came at first. She shifted, leaned back, then forward again as though the weight of her own words was too heavy to decide what to carry. Finally she said, I stayed. Too long. Even when I knew he didn't love me anymore. I stayed until I couldn't recognize myself in the mirror. The words hit harder than I expected. She didn't blink when she said them, but her voice cracked just once, so softly it could have been mistaken for breath. I leaned forward before I knew what I was doing. You deserve better than that. Her eyes snapped to mine, searching, like she wanted to believe me but couldn't let herself. You don't get to decide that. I'm not deciding, I said, my voice rougher now. I'm just saying what's obvious. The silence that followed was thick, buzzing with everything we weren't saying. I felt my pulse in my fingertips, in my throat. She was looking at me, really looking, and I knew I should look away but I couldn't. You're too young, she murmured finally. Maybe. I swallowed. But does that make this wrong? Or just harder? Her breath caught. She shook her head slightly, almost laughing, but there was no humor in it. You don't understand. If I let this... She broke off, hands curling into fists in her lap. You already are, I said softly. Letting it. Her eyes closed for a second, long lashes trembling. When she opened them again, they locked on mine, unflinching. She leaned forward, just enough that I felt the heat of her presence, the space between us charged and unbearable. Say it, I whispered before I realized I had. Her lips parted, breath uneven. I can't. But the way she stared at me, the way her hands slid across the couch cushion until her fingers brushed the edge of my thigh, told me she already had. The clock on the wall ticked loud in the stillness. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Her question came like a whisper, almost swallowed by the silence. What happens if we don't stop? Her question, what happens if we don't stop, still hung between us when the knock came. It wasn't loud. Just 3 quick raps against the door. But it cut through the air like a blade. She stiffened instantly, hands snapping back from my thigh. The warmth of her skin lingered even as the space between us grew sharp, unfamiliar. "Don't move," she whispered, eyes wide. She rose quickly, smoothing her blouse, pressing her palms against her face as if she could erase the seconds that had just passed. I sat frozen, every muscle in my body screaming to either stand or vanish. The knock came again. Louder this time. She opened the door a crack, her body blocking most of the view. "Yes?" A man's voice answered, muffled but distinct. "My neighbor." "I thought I left my wallet here," he said. "Do you mind if I?" Her laugh came too fast, too forced. "Not now. I'll bring it tomorrow. It's late." A pause. Then, "All right. Tomorrow, then." His footsteps retreated. She shut the door softly, leaning against it with her eyes closed, her breath shaking as though she'd been holding it since the first knock. My chest felt like it was caving in. She turned to face me, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with something between fear and defiance. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I know." My voice cracked. "But you didn't ask me to leave." Her gaze faltered, and for a moment she almost smiled. Then it vanished. "You don't understand," she said, her voice low but trembling. "He's not just a neighbor to you. He's more. He told me about you, how you've been helping him. Fixing things. Watching the place when he's gone. He said you were like family." The word hit harder than the knock. Family. Not by blood, not by law, but close enough to make what we were circling feel even more forbidden. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "And still, here we are." She stepped closer, so close I could see the tiny scar near her lip, the one I'd never noticed before. "That's why this is impossible. Because he trusts me. Because you—" Her voice broke, just slightly. "Because you shouldn't want this." But I did. Every part of me wanted it, even as guilt pressed heavy on my chest. "You think I can just walk out now?" I asked, softer than I intended. She didn't answer. Instead, she sat down beside me again, her hands gripping the edge of the couch like it was the only thing keeping her steady. "I've already ruined too much," she whispered. "I can't ruin you too." I wanted to tell her she hadn't ruined anything, that she couldn't. But the words tangled, caught in my throat. Instead, I just looked at her, searching, waiting. And she looked back, eyes raw, wide open, holding everything she couldn't say. The silence between us pressed heavier than the neighbor's knock, heavier than all the words we hadn't said. She sat so still beside me, her hands trembling against the couch cushion, the faintest shake betraying the storm she was holding back. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, afraid to touch her, afraid not to. "You think I don't know this is wrong?" I said quietly. "Every second I do. But that doesn't make me want it less." Her breath caught. Her head tilted just enough for me to see her eyes shining, raw. "Don't say that." "I have to," I whispered. "Because if I walk out tonight and never say it, it'll eat me alive." She laughed then, short, sharp, broken. "You don't know what it means to be eaten alive. To give yours to someone who only half sees you. To stay so long you forget what it feels like to want anything at all." Her voice cracked on the last word, and before I could think, my hand covered hers. She flinched, just barely, then didn't move. "You think I don't see you?" My voice was shaking. "I notice everything. The way you hold your breath when you're about to speak, like you're bracing for someone to cut you off. The way you fix your hair without realizing it every time you feel exposed. The way you stop." Her voice was soft but urgent, her fingers tightening beneath mine. You don't get to say those things. Why not? Because I'll believe you. The words undid me. For a moment I couldn't breathe. She turned her face away, eyes squeezed shut, but her hand stayed under mine, gripping tight like a secret. I leaned closer, just enough for my voice to find her ear. Then believe me. Her eyes opened, meeting mine, wide and unguarded. The weight of all her years, all her regrets sat there, but so did something else. Something she was terrified to name. You're going to hate me for this, she whispered. I couldn't. She exhaled slowly, her forehead brushing mine, the smallest touch, but enough to shatter whatever distance we'd been pretending to keep. For a breathless moment, we just stayed there, two people pressed together by everything we shouldn't want and everything we couldn't stop. When she pulled back, tears glistened at the corners of her eyes. If this ruins you, it won't, I cut in, my voice fierce. The only thing that could ruin me is leaving tonight and pretending you don't matter. She searched me, desperate, as though waiting for me to falter. But I didn't. Her hand rose, trembling, and brushed my cheek. A simple touch. But it was enough. We sat in that fragile stillness, nothing left to hide. And in her silence, in her tears, in the way she didn't let go, I knew we had already chosen. The night had gone still. No more knocks, no more phone calls, no more excuses left to hide behind. Just the two of us, sitting in the quiet, our hands still linked like either of us trusted what would happen if we let go. I kept waiting for her to pull away. To remind me of the neighbor, of the years between us, of the reasons we couldn't. But she didn't. Instead, she stared down at our hands, her thumb brushing absently against my skin. A small, unconscious gesture that said more than anything she'd admitted out loud. You shouldn't matter this much, she whispered. I almost laughed, but my chest ached too much for it. Too late. She looked at me then, really looked, and I could see the regret still there, sharp as glass. But alongside it was something else, something softer. A quiet relief. As if, for the first time in too long, she felt seen. I thought I'd used up all my chances, she said, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry. That love, wanting, all of it, belonged to a younger version of me. The kind I buried when I stayed too long was someone who didn't care if I disappeared. I swallowed, my throat tight. Maybe this isn't about second chances. Maybe it's about finally choosing yourself. She blinked fast, like the words hit deeper than she wanted them to. Then, slowly, she let out a shaky laugh. And what about you? What do you think you're choosing? I didn't hesitate. You. The silence that followed was heavy, but no longer unbearable. It felt like something had been decided, not neatly, not perfectly, but decided all the same. She leaned back into the couch, her shoulder brushing mine, and this time she didn't pull away. For the first time, the house didn't feel half-lived. It felt full. The guilt was still there, I knew it would be. The weight of the neighbor's trust, the shadow of her past. But so was the truth, that some connections arrive like storms, impossible to ignore, reshaping everything they touch. She sighed softly, resting her head against her hand. You're going to regret this someday. Maybe, I said, turning toward her. But not tonight. And when she smiled, small, fragile, but real, I knew I'd follow her into whatever came next. Because sometimes, the risk isn't in crossing the line. The risk is in never knowing what waited on the other side. Speech Balloon, did you enjoy the story? What moments stayed with you the most? And what kind of stories would you like to hear next?